Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here, for checking out the episode. Hit that subscribe button. That way you can keep up with all the interviews that we put out every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover those new ones. You can grab us any of the usual spots, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, NPR, WFPK.org, Consequence, or of course, right here on YouTube for the video versions. Anywhere you get your podcast from, you can subscribe to Kyle Meredith with. That's me, Kyle Meredith, today catching up with Guy Garvey of Elbow. They've got a brand new record called Audio Vertigo. It's their 10th album and falls even on a big round birthday for several of the band members as they hit 50. I want to hear about what that means for the whole set. There's going to be shout outs in this interviews to the Beatles, to R.E.M, to Talk, which they sort of lifted a beat from. And it's a beats-driven record. That's the thing about this album. The last record was it was very down-tempo. It was very slow and melodic. This is the opposite. So it feels like a bit of a reaction. We're going to discuss that. I'll hear about some of the pseudonyms that populate the lyrics and some of the inside stories. The way Guy's writing, especially on this album, it's cloaked in his personal life in ways that we don't know who these people are, but we'll get a few of those backstories. I'm also going to ask about seeing a knife fight in Istanbul and how that relates to how we communicate to each other. All that and more. We're talking Audio Vertigo. It's Kyle Meredith with Guy Garvey of Elbow.
That's a very cool looking studio. Is that in your house or?
This one's in my house. Yeah, I was
No.
just laughing about this with Anna. I said I don't know if this is just cool nerdy or immature nerdy, but you know, one of the two.
No, I like it. Look, I've got similar sort of arrays of knickknacks
uh-huh.
up there. Got my Russian leader dolls.
Right.
Yeah, a little sculpture of the moon, and a miniature bust of Nefertiti, which me and my wife brought back from Berlin. We went to see the famous bust of Nefertiti in Berlin, and we brought my son back a little statuette. He didn't know it was missing one eye, and he was kind of overtired. He's only 6, and I was like, "Look, here she is. It's like 4,000 years old," and he was like, "She's so beautiful." I absolutely lost his shit. Traumatized him. In the bath later on, he said, "I could still see her face in my mind." Yeah, that wasn't the desired effect. Scared the poor bugger.
Still, that's so much, ancient relic, and I've got Ren and Stimpy here from space. So yeah.
Oh God, I love Ren and Stimpy. Save my walrus.
It's so good to have you on here. It's been a long time since
Thank you.
we've talked.
Yeah.
This new record. I mean, listen, I think you could just do some of those like voice things for an album, and I would be happy with what you do. But luckily, it's even better than that. And Audio Vertigo, this album is so good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what this is what? This is album 10, right? Does that mean anything? Does that carry any extra weights?
It's kind of the same year as 3 of us turned 50. In fact, I'm 50 tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, man. And yeah, it's a nice round number. I know that my guitarist Mark has always said 10 albums, and I think that's a good number. That's it. But I think he's regretting that now. Yeah, it's lovely. I mean, there was such a period of uncertainty before we started this one with the whole bloody pandemic, etc. And actually, the album that we made in that time, which is a very subtle, incredibly personal thing, kind of came and went without any fanfare. There's nothing for radio on that record, really. And the column inches were hard to come by because of the bottleneck of people releasing albums at the same time. But part of us thought, oh, that's our lot. We're sort of approaching 50. Maybe this is it. Maybe a hardcore of fans. But the fuss over this one has been amazing. So we're all sort of surfing cloud 9 at the moment. We're all really happy.
Yeah. I mean, this one, it does have a swagger to it. Do you find that I mean, most records happen in the way they happen, you know, however they happen, but there are some of those that's sort of in contrast to the one before, you know, so
Uh-huh.
like purposefully. Do you find that it's one or the other in this case?
I think there was one conversation right at the beginning of making this record. Well, first of all, it was partly prompted from our drummer Al. It's his fourth album with the band.
Mhm.
Um, and he asked after the last one, when I suggested Craig and he get together and make some beats, he sort of, in quite a teenagey way, kind of went, "Oh man, oh, can I? Oh, I feel awkward." I was like, "What? And he's like, "I want to be more in on the writing." And it was like, okay. And the way it was put across was it was nothing to do with fiscal stuff. It was just he loves playing with the band and he wanted a hand in writing it. And it's like he's been with us 7 years. It was like, yeah, let's do that. And him and Craig started the ball rolling. And at that point, we were so happy to be playing together. I think we were playing some massive stately home somewhere. Um, and they played us the beats they'd come up with, Craig and Al. And I remember saying, should we make a really beaty album? And everyone just went, yeah. And I think that was the only conversation. And it was like a lot of it was done in a little room, sort of facing one another and playing at the same time, like we started out. We haven't written like that in decades.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what we imagine as fans. That's how it happens. And I know that's not always how, it's obviously not how it always happens, but I think when you have the romantic image of the musicians, the band creating the record, that's what it is, right? It's just right there jamming it out, you know, for
Yeah, and it's hasn't been like that since 2003. It's kind of like, well, I'll tell you what it was. In about 2003, we were embarking on our second album. We realized that we fell out an awful lot when writing. And it clicked one day that because you're having to shout over amplifiers and drum kits, um, your body thinks you're angry
uh,
because you're shouting. So then we sort of started miking things up in another room so we could control the ampli, and talk to each other in headphones. And then we started experimenting, perhaps after the fifth album, we started experimenting with having different days off. I voiced a documentary on the Beatles for the BBC, and there was an interview with an engineer from the White Album who said when any three Beatles, and it didn't matter which three, were in the room, the work ethic was as ferocious as it had always been. But when all four were there, they were joined by the spirit of lethargy. And it resonated with me. I thought, of course, because same group dynamic, same music. You're only a sum of the things you've experienced.
right.
So I said this to the boys, and I was like, look, we're lucky there's five of us. Because at the time, we'd all been having a Wednesday off because I'm a broadcaster as well, and that's when I was making my show. So we all had Wednesday off, and that was like that for a few years. And I said, look, there's five of us, let's all have a different day off. And that kick-started the whole thing for a couple of records. And then I've lived in London now for 7 years. I lived in New York briefly. And making stuff long distance was how the last three or four records were made. And then this one, right back to zero, in a room, facing each other, shouting.
Was the REM song "We All Go Back to Where We Belong"? That's what yeah.
That's a man with a turn of phrase, eh?
He knows how to do it. He really does. You
Do you
know,
know my favorite one of his is so brief and so perfect. It's furious balancing
uh-huh. I know.
in Day Sleeper.
Yeah.
And you get the man on the tightrope with the pole. It's a beautiful image. It's
Day Sleeper is
furious
probably
balancing.
my favorite REM song of all time. I'm not even joking.
Me too. I mean, it's up there. I'd say it's either Day Sleeper or Perfect Circle.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
But those lines, and I'm actually going to pull this back to you in a second, but like, you know, he'll do like hint of the century. You know, that was it just what those small lines when I'm listening to this record, and I don't know if you know, so we're talking about the different recording techniques, like if the way you write a song has changed over the years, because
Yeah.
sometimes you can write a story and the story is very obvious and the story is specific, and sometimes I don't know who Doc and Jim are. You know, I
Yeah,
you know,
nobody does.
right, that's what I'm saying. And I feel like there are more of those moments in this record that I maybe even at least noticed before, like those are
Mhm.
happening. um it's not exactly collage writing, but it is a bit of um you know, we're not privy, it's not inside jokes, but it sort of is, I guess, right?
But I think it's uh so Doc and Jem are they're pseudonyms. All the names are pseudonyms. They're all character names. And like I've always loved it in other people's writing when they've made some Napoleon is weeping, his invisible fiance is in the mirror. And it's like I've always loved it. But they're all true stories, or they're all fragments of so Doc and Jem, um, Doc or Jem, whichever you prefer, was the first of my friends to come out. Um, and bear in mind, this is 1991. It was a very different issue, especially in the north of England. Um, and then celebrating how accepted he was and how wonderful everybody was about it, including his family. He went on a bit of a spree. Um, and he slept with a few guys who I would say it's probably their only homosexual experience,
Okay.
and he was very persuasive. But one guy he slept with and told everybody about, and the guy disappeared. And I've always found that really sad.
Mm.
And as I say in the lyric, I hope it doesn't weigh on Jem, because back then everybody had a gob on him. That's the lyric.
Yeah.
And it's true. Everybody talked about their sexual conquests, and he didn't know that was going to trash the guy's life, chase him out of town. So it's little things like that. I hope that people pick up on the fact that there's a resonance of a true story underneath
Mhm.
those little snippets. The character in the same song, Jesus Abyssinia, is a mixture of two or three characters that were all too old to be hanging around with us as teenagers, And Jesus, because one guy in particular was Spanish, and Abyssinia, because I thought, what kind of a fucker uses the pre-revolution name for Ethiopia? You know what I mean? And yeah, never crushed anything. I guess that refers to these crushed velvet jackets and these little tinctures in the drinks of people around him, one of those horror bags. And the whole song, um, is about the horrors and the terrors and the absolute delights of being 17.
Yeah. Which I love. And again, when you hear the whole story, you're like, oh, of course, I get it now. But your poetry and your lyrics are poetry. They are. They're absolutely poetic.
Thank
You
you,
know,
Kyle.
and that's of course how I, especially when I read them, it's almost like a poem, because a poem, there's always, a lot of times there's a lot of mystery to it, and it's almost up to you, maybe in a mathematical way, to sort of figure that out, and
Well,
uh,
I see a lot of it as well. I mean, the pervasive thing with this record was fun as a motivation.
yeah.
Um, Particularly the song "Her to the Earth," which starts with this kind of farty, bad horn sample being played. It almost sounds like the Jaws theme tune, but crappy. And when Pete and Craig, and then it breaks into this sort of broken groove, like a funk, but like a little bit crap. And like when they played it to me, I'd been away working on something very earnest in the next room. And I came in and this was going on, and Craig and Pete are looking at me and dancing. And I was like, what the fuck is this? And they were like, it's fun. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh, now I get it. It's fun.
Yeah. I honestly don't think in 33 years someone had said it's fun, and it took me ages to come up with something for it. And when it did happen, through this process of layering my voice over and over, and every time changing a syllable until the words appeared. And then it sounded a bit like Hall and Oates, which I wasn't expecting. But then the chorus, I had to completely counter it to make sense of it. And for the first time, I was like, you know, the drum beat on the chorus of Happiness is Easy by Talk Talk. I was like, not like that, exactly that.
Oh wow.
And we did exactly that, you know, like an homage, a nod. And it's become my favorite track on the record because it stretched me as a writer, and because, as the gods Pete and Craig intended, it's fun.
It definitely stands out, and it like almost as a centerpiece in the record. And again, you know, I go back when I hear that song, it's like the line that came to me, it's not a lyric in it, but the idea that came to me, it's like, you think you've got problems, just look around. You know, they're a lot bigger out there than they are in this little bubble, you know, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I feel like a lot of these songs, they have that. They're like, there's this opposition in the song, and then there's, to put it simply, there's love at the end of the
yeah,
rainbow, you know, and that seems like to be the solution
yeah.
as much as it can be. Is that close to maybe what you were going for?
Well, that song particularly, hang on, was it that one? No, Baloo. Before I conjured up the character of Baloo, borrowing from lots and lots of different people I love to make this one bear-like figure. It had a very different feel, the intensity of the music. And I was singing the refrain, broken prayers are raining down on London town. And I built on that lyric. And I did it like a siren. Broken prayers are, and it was hard hitting, and it was to the point, and it wasn't fun. And I thought, there's enough of this kicking about, you know. We're all fathers. Um, we're all terrified by what's happening in the world, and crestfallen and heartbroken by the division in everyday life. And we thought we wanted to offer a distraction rather than a reflection this time. You know, our politics are well documented, and we're not afraid of a dark lyric or a sad lyric or a cry from the heart on something that we're passionate about. We thought, I don't think that's what everybody needs, and it's certainly what we don't need. You know, we need release, we need harmony, we need fun, we need something a bit more casual, something that's a bit more from the hips, you know, and something that will prompt questions, which is why this is so satisfying, Kyle.
Well, you related a knife fight in Istanbul to how we
Yeah.
communicate with each other.
Oh, do you know what, man? I love telling this story. So my wife is posh. I never thought I'd marry a posh person. I'm from a small working, no, a large working class family. I grew up in a small house. Um, Rachel's dad is a landowner. Her mum was a Hollywood movie star, and she's posh. She's a posh Shakespearean actress. Um, and we weren't expecting to meet each other, but within the first couple of hours of talking, we realized we've got different enough life experiences, because we met at 40. I was 40.
Right.
We've got different enough experiences of life while living in the same country that it'll keep us going till long after we're dead, you know, just the stories. And it's she's fascinating. But one thing that can be said of her is that she sometimes has quite a short temper, and she can be a little bit snippy if she's distracted, you know. And I have a tendency to follow around the kitchen while she's cooking, or telling her something that I've been thinking very deeply about. And she'll literally be trying to move from
Right.
one place to another with something in her hands. And I'm like, actually, no, I had this thing. So one morning it was like, hey, I remembered something that happened years ago. Did I ever tell you about this knife fight I witnessed in Istanbul? And she went, what? What? Like that. I said, I witnessed a knife fight in Istanbul. And she was like, Jesus, what? Why? Why are you telling me this now? I was like, I don't know. I was wondering why I woke up thinking about it. And she went, right. And I thought, and now you're having the chorus. So as a permanent testimony to her short fuse, I related it to our sometimes broken communication
I love
system.
that. And I want you, I love you, and I need you. At least that line is in there. Just to be like, listen,
Yes.
we're good.
Yeah. I was terrified playing it to her for the first time, of course.
How'd it
But
work?
you know what? Huh?
How'd it go over?
She laughed her head off, which was the desired effect.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I know I'm up against the clock here. I will say, as far as lyrics go, I'm the dashboard hula girl of nodding self-deprecation or deception, self-deception. I'm sorry. That's, as we're talking about favorite lyrics, that's probably it for me on this album. That's
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're the first person to pick up on it, Kyle. That means a great deal to me.
I mean, you can
Yeah.
see it and understand it, and everything is right there. It's, or at
Yeah.
least how I feel about it. That's a great one. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, that whole song is, it started out as, truisms. When I met my wife, we met at a wedding. We were in quite a noisy space afterwards. So we had to be forehead to forehead in order to hear each other. And it was during this period that we started admitting our faults to one another. And then we moved on to things like, what do you think you're good at? And I said very earnestly, I think I can read people. And since then, she's delighted in proving that wrong over and over again.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, right.
yeah, I said like the whole song sprang from, I thought, what else have I been telling myself for years? But then I also, in the spirit of fun, started wondering who I would be if I was only surrounded by people who agreed with me, and if I still did all the drugs they put in front of me, And there's a couple of pretty maniacal frontmen on the scene at the moment, like real left the building egos, Trumpian even in their sort of detachment to reality. And and part of me thinks, fuck me, I could have gone there if I'd met the wrong people, done the wrong drugs. So that's what I did with the character in the song.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that. And I love that of course she sniffed that right out, because we're about to me and my wife are about to celebrate our 10th wedding anniversary later this year. And it is those moments.
Congratulations.
The moment you make a definitive statement like, "Oh, you can read people, huh?" That comes back 5 years later. "Oh, you can really read people, huh?" Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. It's good to have a constant check on your
Right.
shoulder, wearing you down, day in. I'm only joking. And luckily, my missus is hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good to have. That is.
Yes. Yeah.
This album is so good. It really is so good. I love hearing Elbow anytime, and this sits up there with one of my favorites. So, Guy,
Thank
it
you,
has
Kyle.
been a pleasure talking to you once again. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
And thank you very much, Kyle.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All 3 of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.